Did a post-war sugar shortage in Britain shape your grandchildren's cancer risk? Welcome to OrbitReports. We often think of our health as the result of what we eat today, or perhaps what our parents ate. But what if the answer lies in the very first 1,000 days of life? Specifically, the time from conception to a child's second birthday. A recent study published in The Conversation suggests that how much sugar you consumed during those early years could shape your health decades later. Even into your 70s, researchers asked a simple but profound question: could how much sugar you consumed before your second birthday shape your health decades later? The answer, it seems, is yes. People who had less sugar exposure during those first few years of life were much less likely to develop several different cancers later in life. They also showed signs of slower biological aging. This is not an easy question to study in real life. Researchers obviously can't run that experiment on real babies, splitting them into groups, feeding one group sugar, and then waiting 70 years to see what happens. But Britain's post-war sugar rationing offered a rare alternative. After the Second World War, sugar remained rationed in Britain for several years. But in September 1953, rationing ended and people started eating a lot more sugar. Consumption nearly doubled. This meant that children born just a few months apart had very different levels of sugar exposure both in the womb and during early childhood. For our study, we used data from over 64,000 people born in Britain between 1951 and 1956. Those born earlier spent a larger share of their first 1,000 days under sugar rationing, while those born later experienced progressively less of it. By the first 1,000 days, we mean the period from conception to a child's second birthday. This is a critical stage because the body is developing very rapidly. Organ systems are forming, metabolic pathways are being laid down, and the body is essentially writing the software for how it will process energy for the rest of its life. The timing of that software installation matters immensely. The results were striking. The analysis found that individuals who experienced lower sugar exposure during those early developmental windows grew into adults with significantly lower cancer risk. This wasn't just a minor fluctuation. We are talking about a measurable reduction in the likelihood of developing several different cancers later in life. Furthermore, these individuals showed signs of slower biological aging. Their bodies seemed to age at a more gradual pace compared to those who had higher early sugar exposure. This suggests that the early diet doesn't just affect weight or diabetes risk, but potentially the fundamental mechanisms of cellular aging and cancer development. The body remembers what it was fed when it was building itself from scratch. The biological imprint left by that early sugar intake appears to linger for decades, influencing how cells divide and how they protect themselves against mutations. But the story doesn't end with cancer risk. The researchers also found that even in adulthood, those who had less sugar exposure in infancy continued to consume less sugar and had healthier diets overall. This is a fascinating feedback loop. It suggests that early sugar exposure might program a preference or a physiological need for sugar that persists throughout life. If your body is calibrated to expect high sugar levels during its most vulnerable developmental window, it might crave or seek out more sugar later on, even when it isn't necessary. Conversely, those who grew up with less sugar during that critical period seem to maintain healthier dietary habits well into adulthood. This implies that the foundation of our long-term health is often laid down before we even have the cognitive ability to make conscious food choices. The first 1,000 days are not just about growth. They are about setting the trajectory for a lifetime of metabolic health. So, how does this happen? The mechanism is likely epigenetic. One commenter pointed out that there is evidence of epigenetic impact from other historical famines. For instance, there is a paper about the Dutch famine during the Second World War, which demonstrates epigenetic damage and risk factors for metabolic disease in adulthood. Epigenetics refers to changes in gene expression that do not involve changes to the underlying DNA sequence. Essentially, environmental factors like nutrition can turn certain genes on or off. When a baby is exposed to high levels of sugar during rapid development, it might permanently alter how their body regulates insulin, processes glucose, or manages inflammation. These changes can persist for decades, increasing the risk of disease long after the sugar rationing has ended. It is a biological memory of scarcity or abundance written into the very code of our cells. The community reaction to this research highlights the complexity of nutrition. One commenter noted that the rationing diet was perfectly balanced nutritionally, to the point infant mortality went down in the UK. They suggested that if you want to lose weight and eat healthy, you should copy rationing, focusing on low sugar, low meat. And lots of seasonal vegetables, however. Not everyone is convinced it is purely biological. Another user asked if Occam's razor doesn't suggest cultural factors first. They pointed out that forcing your kids to always finish their food following depression and war rationing eras might be the real driver. A parent replied that guilt would play a far bigger factor than epigenetics, citing the phrase about children starving in America as a contributor to overeating habits. These cultural nuances are important. We cannot ignore the psychological weight of food scarcity passed down through generations. Ultimately, this study reminds us that health is not just about the present. It is a continuum that stretches back to our earliest moments. The first 1,000 days are a critical window where our bodies are most plastic, most responsive to their environment. What we feed them during that time can set the stage for their entire future. Whether through epigenetic changes or cultural conditioning, the sugar we consume today is shaping the health of our grandchildren tomorrow. It is a powerful argument for paying attention to early childhood nutrition, not just for weight management, but for long-term disease prevention. The past is not just prologue, it is biology. Thank you for watching Orbit Reports. Stay curious, and we will see you in the next briefing. Thank you for watching Orbit Reports. Stay curious, and we will see you in the next briefing.